Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I want to do something a little bit different. It's not a repair, it's really more of a show and tell. I want to talk about PCMCIA, the ubiquitous expansion card that defined mobile computing from the early 1990s all the way to the late 2000s, and actually perhaps a little bit beyond that. Here you can see I have quite a selection of many of the different types of PCMCIA cards that would have been available throughout its lifetime. And what I want to do is kind of talk through some of the different generations here, some of the possibilities, and go through a little bit of the historical significance. So let's get right to it. So first, I want to start by talking about what exactly is PCMCIA. Well, it's one of the industry's most confusing acronyms. It actually stands for Personal Computer Memory Card International Association. And if that's not quite a mouthful, I don't know what is. It actually led to one of the funnier jokes in computing of the acronym, "People can't memorize computer industry acronyms," which is probably why later on, early into the lifetime of PCMCIA, the cards themselves were actually renamed PC card, which actually makes a little bit more sense, but also a little bit not. Are laptops PCs? I guess technically they are, but laptop or mobile card may have made more sense. Of course, there are some desktop computers with PCMCIA slots, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time, these were to expand a laptop. So where did PCMCIA cards come from? Well, one might think they just kind of sprung up from nowhere, but of course we know that in computing that's never the case. The standards like these are typically built off of the backs of other existing standards, and then working groups come together to create a standardization body where the form factor of the cards can be defined, the electrical characteristics, and of course the way that they communicate with the host machines. So PCMCIA. Well, when PCMCIA 1.0 came out, there was already a standard called JEIDA, and that stands for the Japan Electronic Industry Development Association. These cards were used in some early models of computers, both by IBM and other manufacturers such as Neo Geo, using these as memory cards in their devices. So it wasn't until JEIDA 4.0 that this aligns with PCMCIA 1.0, and this defines the 68-pin connector that is used on the cards, as long as other physical attributes such as the notches on either side, and we'll talk about those in just a little bit. But overall, JEIDA and PCMCIA 1.0 are effectively the same thing. And that's because it seems like as soon as the JEIDA standard was coming out and becoming popular in the Japanese market, that the US government may have stepped in and mandated that there be some sort of a control body for defining how these cards would actually interoperate. And so I think that kind of leads to where the PCMCIA working group comes from. And as confusing as all of that may be, well, there's many different types of PCMCIA cards. You'll of course undoubtedly notice that some of these cards are very flat, whereas some of these cards have a little bit of a ridge to them. And then other cards, well, they are effectively what are known as full height PC cards or PCMCIA cards. So let's start looking at some of the early history, and I'll kind of run through this from the beginning, starting with the earliest PC cards that I have, working all my way to some of the later cards. So let's get cracking. And as you can see here, I have quite a collection of PC cards. I have many more, but I think this is a good representation of the kind of different types of PCMCIA cards you're likely to run across, some more obscure ones, and definitely some more ones that are purpose-built for specific machines. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, what were some of the first computers to use PCMCIA? Well, I happen to have an exact example of that. That would be the Pocket PC, which we looked at and repaired in another video. This unit takes two PC cards loaded into small trays that extend out from the side. So what's interesting about this machine is that unlike most anything else that takes PCMCIA cards, there is no cutout for ports to come out of the side. And that's because this machine predates the PCMCIA standard in which cards could be used as input-output. Up till then, the PC cards used in machines like the Pocket would have been used only for storage. So let's take a look at a couple of those kind of cards. For storage for machines like the Pocket PC that came out in early 1989, one of the earliest known examples of a computer or a PC using PCMCIA cards. Of course, there's a few other machines that may have used these. I think the Neo Geo used them as some sort of a memory card, but being as that's not really a PC, it doesn't run x86 compatible software, I'm going to make the claim that the Pocket PC is the very first device to ever use PCMCIA commercially. So let's take a look at some of those cards that were available for the Pocket. One of those earliest cards is this, which is a 512 kilobyte SRAM card. These back up the contents of the memory inside of the card using a small button cell battery that comes out of this tray right here. And of course, there's even a write protect switch that if you turn this to write protect on with a battery inside, it effectively becomes a very, very fast ROM card. And as you can see, this card is perfectly flat. There is no protrusions along the edges. And as you can see here, we can see the mechanical interface of the card. One of that is denoted by a very small notch here on this side and two notches on the other. The interesting thing about the notch is this specifically denotes this as a 16-bit PCMCIA card. If we take a look at another one from the card bus era, we can see that the connector is exactly the same. There's the same amount of pins in the same place, but the edge over here is much thicker. This has the result of allowing 16-bit cards to still fit in and work in modern card bus-based machines, while the card bus cards will not fit in mechanically to the older machines. If we take a look at some of these other cards, I have two here that look identical, and in fact they're very, very similar. These are two SRAM cards as well. This one here is 1 megabyte, and this one here is 4 megabyte. And pretty lucky to come across this 4 megabyte SRAM card, as it's making working with the Pocket a lot easier to transfer files on and off of the machine. But one thing about these SRAM cards is that it doesn't really say anywhere on there really what the card is at all. But it's pretty easy to tell because SRAM cards will always have some sort of a battery and a write protect functionality. The way you can tell that this is a 1 megabyte card is to look at the model number. So you can see the 1M here in the model number denoting this is a 1 megabyte card, and the 4M here denoting this as a 4 megabyte SRAM card. And so those are very interesting. These are pretty hard to come by these days because they're still used in a lot of industrial control applications. Yeah, I think that's kind of where a lot of these are ending up. If we take a look at some of the other cards from the same era as the Pocket, obviously we have a PC application card. And this is actually a linear flash card. This is not the same as ATA, where you can use compact flash cards and hard drives and other devices over the PCMCIA connector. This specifically implements a different protocol. And this is a 1 megabyte flash card. It does not have any sort of battery, but you can see it does still have a write protect switch. That's because these cards are actually reprogrammable, but it's quite difficult to do so. You need a very specific set of software and a PCMCIA-based computer that can supply the necessary 12 volts to these cards for programming. Most modern computers, the Librettos, none of the other Toshibas, or really any other laptop in my collection will write these cards. I have a different ISA-based PCMCIA card that does in fact have the 12 volt necessary to program these. And of course, there's another few examples of flash cards. So if we take a look at this early Mac Store 4 megabyte card, this works on the same principle. This is a slightly newer version, but again, this is not an ATA card, it is a linear flash card. That's important because older machines, especially the Pocket and the HP OmniBook line, have difficulty reading from ATA-based cards. So they would often use these cards for software or for some sort of a persistent storage. And then a couple of more examples of that. I have a Maxtor 7 megabyte and then an Intel flash. And this kept going for quite some time, and I think this is the largest one that you're likely to see. It's a 24 megabyte linear flash card. And what's interesting there is that the Pocket will only read cards up to 8 megabytes in size. That's because they didn't hook up all of the necessary address lines, so there's no way to address the additional memory that you would have on a 24 megabyte card. So that's why I have some that are of this lower capacity, even though it seems like the higher capacity linear flash cards are the way to go. So all of the cards that we've looked at so far are what's known as PCMCIA Type 1 or PC Card Type 1. And this is important because there's several different interface styles for these cards, or rather mechanical thicknesses that kind of define how they're used. So the Type 1 cards are always easy to tell because they have no ridges and they are perfectly flat. So as we can see, all of these are certainly not Type 1 cards. These are the Type 1 cards here, and here's some Type 1 cards, and these are also Type 1 cards. The Type 2 cards, these are a good example, are cards like this, which is a couple of multimedia card readers, and of course things like modems and Ethernet cards. And what makes these different is that they do stick up slightly, so a card like this won't fit in a computer that is only designed to support the Type 1 thickness. These will not fit in the card trays of the Pocket. If you tried to insert one of these, you would almost certainly damage the machine. Not because of the electrical connector, but only because of the thickness of the card. Now, most laptops, or actually every laptop that I've really ever come across, is always equipped to handle at least Type 2 cards, which is this extra thickness. Type 3 cards, on the other hand, are a little bit different. And this is kind of what I would refer to as a full-height PCMCIA card, and I have a couple of examples of those. So this is an actual tiny little 40 megabyte Western Digital hard drive that also interfaces over PCMCIA. And of course, you can insert this into a machine that has a compatible slot, in addition to this rather cool Intel Ethernet card. It's a little beat up. I've had this one for a number of years. But the really cool thing about cards like this is that if I take an example such as the Toshiba Libretto 100 CT, these cards will insert into the machine like so and become completely flush with the side. So this is actually really nice to have just an Ethernet cable that'll plop right into the side of the computer. Nothing's coming out, nothing to get broken off as I carry the machine around. And of course I can just eject that, like so. And what's interesting is that machines like the Libretto actually have two PCMCIA slots. So if you see down in there, and I'm not sure it's going to focus correctly, but there are actually two rows of contacts on the inside. And that's rather useful because maybe you want one card that provides Ethernet and another card that provides a modem. And for machines like the Libretto, well, that's especially useful because it has no ports. You can plug in a microphone and you can plug in a speaker, but other than plugging in power, there is nothing going to happen with this machine unless you use one of these PCMCIA cards. And in fact, that's why I love cards like this Ethernet card so much, and some of the other cards that we'll get into here in just a moment. And something I wanted to demonstrate here, if we look at a Toshiba Libretto 50 CT, this one, of course, has the USB-C modification that I featured in a previous video. So if we take a look at some of these cards, we can tell right away that if we take this FireWire card, for example, well, this is a card bus card. So what happens if you try to insert that into a machine that doesn't support card bus? It won't go in. Physically, you cannot get this into that slot. Same thing However, I can take one of my cards for the Pocket PC and insert that directly into the machine. And now I can read and write the SRAM card directly from Windows or DOS, provided you have the correct drivers. So that's incredibly useful as well. So now that we've talked about some of the different types of PCMCIA cards or PC cards, again, Type 1 cards where they're completely flat, Type 2 cards where they have a little bit of a raised edge to them just to provide some extra room for chips inside. One of the other big reasons for the increased height of the cards was to allow things like connectors on the end of the cards. And good example of that are these fantastic X-Jack based Ethernet cards by 3Com. So here we see that this is an X-Jack connector where the Ethernet port pops out from the side and can be recessed back into the card. And these are incredibly useful for connecting up older machines such as the Libretto. And we actually have two versions of this card. So they have a very similar model number, both of them being 3CX FE57, and then they're only differenced by a 4 here and a 5 here. And the only difference really between these two cards is this one is 16-bit and this one is 32-bit. And generally the way you can tell that it's a 32-bit card bus card is they have this gold connector on the top of the card. And I'm not really sure why that is. Perhaps it provides some additional grounding, but I have to imagine that there was enough metal around here to ground anyways. Another example of that is this Firewire card that also has the metal strip. Now, this isn't always true, but perhaps this one is going to be the exception to the rule, because this is actually a fairly modern card produced within the last 10 years or so, and gives you USB 2.0 ports on an old machine that uses PCMCIA. And this is especially useful for things like the Libretto 100 CT, where the only USB port is available on the docking station, which is quite cumbersome. But this card gives you two USB ports right out of the side. And there's even a power input jack if for some reason you're not getting enough power from the USB ports through the PCMCIA slot. But this is indeed a 32-bit card. You can see the notch on this side is definitely thicker, but it does not have the gold connector. So the gold connector on the top is normally a really great way to see the difference between a card bus card, 32-bit card, and non-card bus, they're 16-bit cards. Now, of course, there's nothing to do with the type. When you hear Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, or even Type 4, there's nothing that has to do with the electrical characteristics of the card. They're all either 16-bit 16-bit PCMCIA or they're 32-bit card bus. But yeah. So now that we've taken a look at some of the basics behind PCMCIA, a little bit of the history, and some information about the types of PCMCIA cards, I thought it would be fun to just take a look at a number of these cards and talk about what kind of made them unique or special in their time. And let's get right to it. And of course, we've taken a look at the SRAM cards, so let's take a look at some of the other cards. So I'm going to put these to the side. Let's take a look at some more flash cards. Now, these are interesting because this is an especially interesting card. This is for the HP OmniBook line of computers. The HP OmniBook 300, 425, and 430 use these ROM cards in a rather interesting way. So these ROM cards contain not only a minimal version of both DOS and Windows, including a number of applications, but these cards actually also contain the BIOS for the OmniBook computer. So without one of these cards installed, an HP OmniBook will start up and do absolutely nothing. The screen won't come on. There will be absolutely no activity in the computer. And in fact, it was a very interesting way for HP to provide BIOS updates or additional functionality for the machines by simply producing different application cards. And I can imagine that certain industries may have produced their own for very specific needs. Maybe they didn't need Windows and some of the other files on here, and could have easily loaded this card with some other applications such as Lotus. So that's a rather interesting card for HP. Another one is a HP 95LX demonstration card. And I guess these cards were used as kind of in a tracked mode for demo purposes when the 95LX palm tops would have been on sale back in retail stores. And of course, we've looked at some of the other cards that the Pocket had. This is a Lotus 123 spreadsheet card, so it has the entire Lotus 123 application on it. And what makes these cards pretty interesting is that a lot of times the executables that are on these cards are designed to be run in what's known as execute in place. So that means that the application could run almost entirely from the ROM without needing to be copied over to RAM first. So that's a big difference between a lot of ATA-based cards where the majority of the application will have to be loaded into RAM before the application can run. Whereas with a lot of linear flash cards and applications on them, such as the Lotus 123 card and this HP OmniBook card, is this one also includes a version of Windows that is also execute in place. So even though the OmniBook doesn't have quite the amount of RAM that other machines of the same time would have had, this is still perfectly able to run Windows even from a limited amount of RAM by executing most of it directly from the ROM card. And again, we've already taken a look at some of these linear flash cards, and hopefully I'll be doing a more in-depth video on these with the Pocket at some point in the future. It is, of course, why I have them all, is to do a lot of fun shenanigans with the Pocket PC. The next cards I want to take a look at are all pretty interesting in their own way. First up is an iOmega Click PC card drive. This is again another 16-bit PCMCIA card. But the very interesting thing about this, and it's the only known one that I know that does this, but these actually take their own removable discs. Inside this shield is a tiny magnetic media, very similar to the zip disk technology or the floppy drive technology of the time. And yeah, that's a very cool little card. This one works and everything, but hopefully be looking at that a little bit more in the future. Some more examples are various cards to read different types of removable media. Of course, memory stick was still big around the area of the PC cards being around, and this one being made by Microtech. This one almost certainly is not made by Mercedes-Benz, but rather just branded that way. But this one is an SD card slot, and I believe this even supports large SD cards, so that makes this a rather useful card. And of course you have things like compact flash adapters. And there is no way that this is actually made by SanDisk. This is almost certainly some label that someone has plopped on this card. But the interesting thing about compact flash adapters is there are absolutely no electronics on the inside of this card. This merely takes some of the pins of the PCMCIA connector and routes them to compact flash. So compact flash can almost be seen as a reduced, miniaturized version of PCMCIA. And I hope in the future we'll take a little bit of a more in-depth look at that. Some examples of some of those cards are this, which is an Ethernet card in the compact flash form factor. And this one is even a video capture card. So that's pretty interesting. And you can see that the way that these go in, just like so. And of course that would stick out of the side of your laptop or your PDA or whatever device has the PCMCIA slot. And a great way to add additional functionality to other mobile devices. And so if we keep going, here's another interesting card, which is a smart card reader and writer. And for whatever reason, this is easily the heaviest PC card that I have. It may even be heavier. Yeah, it is for sure heavier than the than the click drive here, and I have no idea why it has this giant metal kind of plate here at the bottom. But this would allow you to read and write cards with that special chip on them, not unlike credit cards these days. And of course, another couple of examples of multimedia card readers. The SanDisk one, which I think this Dazzle card may actually be a clone of. This one allows you to read many different types of cards. Here I have a smart media card used for digital cameras back in the day, and another rather useful card to have in your laptop. Moving on from the cards that are multimedia card readers, we have another set of very interesting PCMCIA cards. This one is actually very, very cool. I don't have batteries in it at the moment, but what this is a digital Rolodex. You can put your contacts in here, your schedule in here, and allows you to view that on the go using a built-in LCD and some control buttons on the side. And when you want to synchronize data into it, you can just slot this directly into your laptop or your PDA and synchronize the data between it, reconfigure it, update the settings, and take this out, take it with you, potentially even put this within your wallet, and then you have all of your contact information with you right on the go, which is very, very interesting. It's almost like it's its own tiny PDA. Some more interesting cards are things like the Slim SCSI cards or any of the SCSI-based cards for PCMCIA. And these are rather interesting because they allow you to connect many different types of drives to laptops. And here's an example of one of those cables. So by using this cable, I'm able to hook up any of the HD50 based SCSI devices. This is SCSI 1 or SCSI 2. They're effectively the same thing, just with slightly different speeds. And this would typically be used in combination with something like this, which is a SCSI-based CD-ROM drive. And here you can see on the back is that SCSI port, and the cable would connect right up to the drive. The drive would connect to the computer via that PCMCIA card. And there you go. Now you have a laptop with a CD-ROM drive, which pretty cool considering many laptops of the day didn't have CD-ROM drives, or they were just fantastically expensive. So that's that SCSI card. There's a number of other interesting cards, and here's one that is a FireWire card. Unfortunately, I don't have the breakout cable for it, otherwise this would be a really interesting card to give it a shot. But yeah, FireWire right from your PCMCIA slot, very cool. Again, that USB 2.0 card. This card, I imagine, was used as some sort of a video output, although it has quite a dense connector here. And this would typically be used for things such as video output from a laptop, and here in the picture they even show it connected to a TV. So I wonder if this supported interfaces like composite and S-video, perhaps even VGA, and definitely a way to get video out of a laptop that doesn't have any external video connections. Which is very interesting because, for instance, the Libretto does not have any external video connections unless you hook it up to the docking station. What's interesting about this is that this claims that this is a macOS compatible card. And yes, in fact, Apple laptops of the era did in fact use PCMCIA cards. So I actually have one more example of that, which is a considerably newer card, which is this one right here. It provides DVI output and claims to be a full video card. So not just a display duplicator, but there is an entire graphics chipset in this card, and that would allow you to connect this to a Mac and potentially use another external display, or in addition to the display connector already on the Mac, to even have two monitors. So that's pretty cool. And these other cards I think we've already kind of looked at, but represent a good range of some of the X-Jack based cards with this pop-out connector. And this one's pretty interesting. I don't think I've tested this one yet, and I'm not really sure what about this makes it cellular, because of course it just has a regular X-Jack connector, and that's just for connecting with a normal phone cable. So I don't know if this is anything more than just a modem, or if it has additional kind of commands that it can communicate with a phone over a phone line, but that is a very interesting card. Definitely want to give that one a test in the future. And then our two 3-COM Ethernet cards. Moving on from those, here we have another one of those USB cards. And as far as I know, this is identical to the other one. Same general physical characteristics, 32-bit card bus card, again, missing the gold-plated connector there, but clearly that's not required to actually make these work. Here we have an original Orinoco gold card. I think I actually used this for war driving back in the day. It does have a antenna connector that is covered up by a small bit of plastic there, so of course you could remove that and connect an external antenna to this card. One of the claim to fames for the Orinoco cards, specifically these at the time, was that they supported something called monitor mode, where they could actually monitor all of the packets and traffic being sent in the clear over the air back in the day. So that's a good bit different from just being able to scan for Wi-Fi networks. You can actually see clients communicating with the host and the host communicating with the clients, and you can capture a lot of that traffic using cards that support monitor mode. And that's what made the Orinoco cards very, very special back in the day. Then we get into things like this, which is a CD-ROM interface card. I believe this is also a SCSI card. It uses a different cable than what connects to the Adaptec cards, but yeah, just another kind of interface card there. And here we have a rather special 3-COM wireless card here with trademarked X-Jack antenna, which kind of pops out from the side, which is also very cool because once you put this in the computer, of course, this will be completely flat, and when you're ready to use Wi-Fi, just pop the antenna out. I believe what makes this card special is that it's one of the very last Wi-Fi cards that will support older operating systems. So there are actually drivers for this for Windows 2000, and I believe there are drivers for Windows 98 as well. But what makes this special is that it can still connect to WPA2 networks. So that means you can actually get a old Windows 2000 or Windows 98 libretto online on Wi-Fi, on modern public Wi-Fis. You can go to the airport, assuming you can get to the capture page, and actually you have a browser that will let you get past that screen. You can even use it with enterprise networks. And then I have two SanDisk solid state cards. Now these are both ATA cards. And one of the easiest ways to tell an ATA card from a linear flash card, so these for example, is that of course these are always flat and these are almost always raised. So it's an easy way to tell kind of what card you're looking at just based off of the physical appearance. What makes this interesting is that these are two SanDisk cards, and this one's label has almost come off, but you can just make out that U. So this was actually before SanDisk had renamed themselves, and they were currently operating under the name SunDisk. And you can kind of see the different way that their logo is treated here. This one's more kind of squared off, whereas this one's more rectangular. And of course on the back you can also see that SunDisk branding right there. I'll get a little bit better view of that. So yeah, those are, again, just some very rather interesting PCMCIA cards. So we've looked at a bunch, but let's look at something a little bit different. These are two PCMCIA card-based floppy drives. Both of these are Toshiba branded, and of course they're designed to be used with mostly the Libretto line of little miniature laptop computers. And the way that these work is the PCMCIA card slots into the side of the Libretto, and the Libretto even has BIOS support for this card, so it can actually boot from the floppy drive. And this is how you would reinstall the operating system on a Libretto without having to take the hard drive out. And I have two examples of that. One of these is has the cord permanently connected, whereas the other one, confusingly, lets you disconnect the cord not only from the floppy drive, but also from the PC card itself. And yeah, just take a look at that. And that is quite the connector. And I believe the main difference is that this may have been the type of card you would typically receive with a libretto in Japan. And this is the more common American version of that with the cable permanently connected. I suppose we couldn't be trusted to unplug cables, but all the same, yeah, two floppy drive based PCMCIA cards here. And I actually even have a third, and this is an Accurite-based passport card, and allows you to connect an external floppy drive to other devices. And I believe this card may actually even be compatible with the HP 200LX. So we may actually take a look at this card in the future and see if we can boot an HP 200LX palm top PC from a floppy drive. I've always wanted to try that. And kind of last but not least, here's an example of a card bus PCMCIA card that is a sound card. And this one is actually made by Creative. So this one has support for an external cable that will break out digital audio and a couple of other interfaces, as well as some built-in jacks for headphones and microphones. And as we get to the end of the PCMCIA card kind of design legacy, is we start to get into some very different types of PC cards. So while I won't really call these PC cards, because of course they're not, these are Express cards. And I have a few examples of those just to take a look at. And look, here's even one that is a serial port. So what makes these a little bit different is that they are neither ISA based, like the 16-bit PCMCIA cards, or 32-bit based, like the card bus based PCI cards, where these are actually based off of the PCI Express standard. And I believe a lot of these also have a USB lane that is also connected to the card, so conceivably these could also be just regular USB-based cards. But here's a couple of examples of those. These are SD card readers, these two. This one actually gives you USB 3.0 ports on an Express card. Also very cool. And of course that serial-based one, which is pretty interesting. PCI Express to serial on a laptop, anyone? Okay. And these that I also found that claims to be a PCMCIA card bus slot on one side, and allows you to plug in an Express card on the other. And I have no idea if this depends on specific support within the Express card, but I thought this would be pretty interesting to see, can we get PCI Express going on an old laptop from the 90s? So that'll be something to look at in the future. And the last thing I kind of wanted to mention as we wrap up here is you will come across things like this, which is a PCMCIA card reader. It says it right there, huh? Well, these will only read ATA cards. These will read these type of cards here, which conform to the ATA specification. They will also read cards, and it's buried in here somewhere, but compact flash cards that are also connected over PCMCIA. But these will not allow you to use anything else. Can't plug in sound cards, network cards, Ethernet cards, USB cards, floppy drives, none of that. None of these other cards will be compatible with a device such like this. So these are pretty much all the same, and they come in many different form factors, but make sure that you're aware, if you're buying one of these for the purposes of testing out different PCMCIA cards, that these are not in fact a PC card controller. They're not a card bus controller. Really, in essence, they are an IDE to USB chip, and a lot of those pins are just connected to the PCMCIA slot to allow these to work. So beware of these. I mean, I bought this with the express intention of only using this with ATA cards. I knew that going into it, but just in case anyone out there is not aware that these do not read other types of cards, these are only for ATA-based cards. And I think that'll about wrap it up. I took a look at a kind of a bunch of different cards here. It was a little bit of a show and tell, a little bit of a departure from the normal types of videos on this channel. We're not repairing anything. We're just kind of looking at a bunch of PCMCIA cards. And, well, I love it. These are some of my favorite devices from the early 90s, late 2000s. I absolutely had many different cards for my laptops back in the day, and they were extremely useful. Network cards, you know, especially the Intel one here that has seen quite a bit of use. I've probably slammed this into 100 different laptops over the years. So that is quite a useful card. Of course, things like the floppy drive cards, incredibly useful for the Libretto computers. SRAM cards, linear flash cards, incredibly useful for things like the Pocket PC, the HP 200LX, the HP OmniBook, and other computers like that. Apple Newton comes to mind as another computer that likes the types of cards that the Pocket reads. And if you like this kind of content, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing below. Definitely have a lot more PC card-based shenanigans in the future. I want to look at getting some versions of Windows perhaps running on the Pocket. Never seen that being done before. Should certainly be possible by copying some files over to an SRAM card and see if we can run some somewhat modern software on the Pocket. Not really sure. Of course, there's a lot of other interesting ones to take a look at. You know, can we get video output from this DVI card? That would be really cool to see. And maybe we'll even get up to some vintage Wi-Fi shenanigans using things like this Orinoco Gold card here in combination with, and I don't know where it went, wherever that Wi-Fi card went. But yeah, I think that'll about do it, and definitely appreciate you taking a look. And that's it for now. Bye.